beginning of time, my time, my dad's absolutely must-have birthday cake was German chocolate cake. I have made this cake a lot in my lifetime. Sometime around 15, I was really into baking, still am, and I started just helping my mom out more with the cake. And so I'm gonna show you the two things that we do a little bit differently than maybe other German chocolate cakes you've had that I think yield a really superb result. Number one is the chocolate cake itself is like a really deep, rich chocolatey cake because I think the frosting is so sweet and wonderful that it needs a little bit of like a bitter contrast in the cake with a lot of flavor to hold up to that frosting. And number two is there's a secret ingredient that goes into the cake that keeps it ultra moist and decadent and gives it an even further like punch of chocolatey flavor that I'm gonna reveal to you today. If you'd like to make a boxed cake mix go for Devil's Food Cake, I'm gonna show you how to do it from scratch. I have to tell you, I think there's a little something that shows up when you do it by hand that can't be beat, but do what you have time to do. This chocolate cake recipe is Ina Garten's at its core, obviously, per usual with Ina. That is my oven heating to 350 degrees. Per usual with Ina, it is perfect. But I am gonna do two small little things differently. Number one, she uses hot brewed coffee in her recipe, which a lot of people do love because it builds up sort of just the depth of flavor for the chocolate. I'm just gonna use hot water. My kids are eating this. I'm assuming the caffeine cooks away or something, but even still, I just don't want anything in the way of my chocolate. And number two is I'm adding, I guess it's time to tell you about the secret ingredient. Ready for this? Boom. Pudding mix. I know it sounds insane, but adding pudding mix into this cake recipe makes it so chocolatey, so moist. It gives it body, like the whole thing changes. So trust me when I tell you it's worth trying it out. First things first are some sugar and some flour. So I have 1 3/4 cups of flour in here, and I'm gonna add the last of 2 cups of sugar. And then we need 2 teaspoons of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And that's gonna give us 2 different times of lift for this cake. So you get a really tender crumb that's nice and light and airy. You need some salt. Yes, I do. So normally recipes like this want like half a teaspoon of kosher salt. I'm using sea salt here, which is a bit saltier by volume. So I'm gonna do more like a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. But trust me, don't skip the salt. Your taste buds need a little salt with the sweet to be able to fully taste the range. And obviously, since we are making chocolate cake, we need some cocoa powder. I have 3/4 cups of cocoa powder here that I just went through like this with a fork because I don't feel like having to sift it. So this is just breaking down any clumps that might be hanging out there. Weren't too many. Just gonna use my fork and bring all of our dry ingredients together. This is in essence what comes in boxed cake mix anyway. So here we are meeting at the same place, but these are all your own ingredients, which is nice. And I just wanna make sure that baking powder and baking soda is evenly distributed so we get a really even rise and beautiful texture on the cake. Guys, I forgot about our pudding mix, which has to go into the dry ingredients. No preference from me on which pudding mix you choose to use other than that it be chocolate. The most natural version you can find is great. I find it can be kind of hard to find a natural version of pudding mix, so this is one place where I make exception because it's a birthday and this is the best way to make this cake. Okay, now that's all incorporated. Now we're gonna start to build the wet ingredients. So because of the pudding mix, I'm gonna add an extra 1/2 cup of shaken buttermilk and an extra 1/2 cup of water. So that brings me to a total of 1 1/2 cups of shaken buttermilk. The buttermilk does add that nice little tang, of course, but it's there to activate the baking soda to make sure that we do get that lift in the cake. Then I need a 1/2 cup of oil. You can use a canola oil or vegetable oil. Whenever a recipe calls for that, I go for avocado oil. It's a little less processed, really neutral flavor. You could definitely also use a 1/2 cup of melted butter if you prefer, which is oftentimes what I will do. But since I have the oil today, the oil gives it just a slightly more tender crumb. I need a splash of vanilla extract. I go for like 2 teaspoons, which is a little bit more than traditional, but I like the flavor. Plus 2 room temperature eggs. I'm out of practice because my kids are normally the ones cracking eggs around here. Any of yours going through the phase where like, if there's an egg being cracked, it must be by them at all times? Yes. We just want to quickly, lightly beat those eggs first, and then start to incorporate the buttermilk and the oil and the vanilla. I do like to take a little bit of time and beat the eggs here because I don't want to risk overworking the batter once I combine the dry and wet ingredients together. So that's good, just like 30 seconds here. And now that we have our wet and our dry, we're gonna start combining them together. So on a low speed, I am just slowly working in that wet into the dry. And I'm gonna stop as soon as it is incorporated because I don't wanna risk developing the gluten here and giving us a chewy cake. We want a tender, light cake. So right there is where I'm gonna stop. Now, if you've ever been a fan of eating raw cake batter, this is the moment at which you really want to taste it because this chocolate sensation is out of control. It's thick and pretty fudgy. And I'm going to do it. Raw eggs have not killed me yet, but that taste is doing it for me. Here it's really thick, obviously. Now we're going to add in that hot water. And this is where the batter becomes so wet, you're going to think we've lost our minds and that this cake couldn't possibly turn out right. It really does. The moisture in this batter keeps it really dense, keeps it really, really moist. And that's what we want. Scrape down the bowl quickly, and then we're gonna add our boiled water. Just make sure we have all that dry mix incorporated. Anything off the bottom so that none of those eggs are left behind, which we do want to help build the body and richness of this batter. Now we need 1.5 cups of boiled water, and that's both for the batter and because of the pudding inclusion. So obviously this is hot water. There are eggs in this batter. I don't want to risk cooking them, so I'm going to add it in slowly and sort of temper the batter first to make sure that these eggs won't be shocked. Now, the bowl's moving, right? I'm like struggling here for no reason. Here's what you're going to do. Grab a cloth. Make it a little bit damp so that it has some heft to it. Place it under your bowl. No more bowl moving away from you. Keep working in that hot water. And now look, what did I tell you? This batter looks like soup. What is going on? Trust me, trust the process. Trust Ina, trust. Perfect. We do not want to overmix it at this point. We're going to give this bowl one last scrape down with our spatula just to make sure everything is beautiful and incorporated. And now let's quickly do what we should have done at the beginning and prepare some cake tins. The only thing you can do to mess up all the effort you're putting in here is not grease and flour these pans enough so that your cake sticks. It's tragedy. Okay, so start like this, and then I would just grab a little pinch off and work that into these inner corners where the cake has the hardest time lifting away after it's baked. Just work it in. Now, since we have it, I'm going to do one other thing that's going to guarantee you easy lift off, which is to cut some parchment paper. This is wax paper, so it's going to work too. I'm going to do 2 at a time. We're just going to cut cake rounds out of this. Parchment paper is my choice here normally, but I have wax paper today, so this is what I will be using. Fold it in half. You guys have seen me do this before. Fold it in half again. Make sure you're keeping that central point linked together because that's going to be what makes you look like a magician when you cut out a circle out of something that looks like a triangle. So once you're at this point, we are going to measure the center of your cake pan, which is roughly there. Straight to the center, out. Slice off the extra, and what's gonna happen? Wow. 2 perfectly cut circles to line the bottom of your cake. I'm just gonna mush it into the butter to grease one side, and then I just flip it over, and then you magically have both sides greased. It's worth taking that extra 2 minutes just to set yourself up for success. Same thing on this side. Add the cake batter into your pan. Evenly split, leaving room to grow. Okay, so the cakes are going into a 300 150-degree oven. So they're gonna be in there like 35 to 40 minutes. We will check on them around that 35 mark, make sure they are cooking up beautifully, evenly. Set a timer. Baking does not mess around. It is time to make my personal favorite part of this delicious cake, coconut pecan condensed milk frosting. It's really basically a couple of shortcuts taken custard that you pour coconut and pecans into. It is sticky. It is just like caramelly, toffee flavored deliciousness. It makes frosting the cake pretty simple because you don't need to worry about it being like a smooth, beautiful situation. It really is supposed to be very textural. And I will tell you that in my family, we always make a double batch because somehow there's never enough to actually properly ice the cake because lots of little pinches go missing as you're making it. This really was my mom's number one, famous contribution to this cake because, first of all, I think her German chocolate frosting is the best I've ever had. And second of all, I think part of the reason that is because it's the ratio of pecans and coconut to kind of that, sticky sort of caramel surrounding. It's also using enough salt. I know, it's always weird when you have to add salt to the sweet, but you do. First things first, we're gonna start, we have a double boiler here, so over a pot of what will soon be boiling water, we are going to add 2 sticks of unsalted butter, and I'm gonna let that melt while the water comes up to heat. And then the only sort of complicated part of this situation is that you can't leave. This is not a set it and forget it kind of move. This is you sit here and you stir and you don't leave for like 20 minutes. And as you stir, you will see the condensed milk thickens even more. It all comes together. It becomes very luxurious, velvety even. And the egg yolks are a big part of that, but if you leave, it will curdle. And if it curdles, it's disgusting. So you're busy for 20 minutes, just putting it out there. I'm adding in 2 cans of sweetened condensed milk. This is my happy place. Get it all out. Do not leave any behind. You will be sad, longing for those last little bits and bobs. If you would like to have the most decadent coffee you've ever had in your life, make yourself a Vietnamese style coffee, which is espresso with condensed milk. It's perfect. Second cup going in. And now you have yourself a bath of dairy heaven, pretty much, that we are going to start whisking together with egg yolks, a pinch of salt, and a splash of vanilla extract. Let's go ahead and add like 2 teaspoons worth right now. That gives a little bit more of that toffee, almost sea salt caramel notes to this frosting, which I think are important. You don't want just straight sweetness. That's never exciting. It gets kind of boring after the first bite. You want that little bit of nuance, which the vanilla brings, and you want a little bit of nuance, which a pinch of salt brings. And I'm going to add in our 6 egg yolks now. Isn't that fun? Watch them hop. Ready? Watch. Boop, boop, boop. And here's the point where your muscles are critical. You cannot stop whisking at all for 15 minutes, maybe 20. Turning the heat down a little bit lower so we don't risk burning. And make sure the water is not touching the base of your bowl. This double boiler setup I have, the water probably comes to the halfway mark of the pan. And it's just creating a steam bath that is heating the base of the bowl without ever getting it too hot. It's been going for 8 minutes. I'm just checking on our water, just making sure there's still plenty in there, which there is. But look at how thickened up it is already. You can see it's really getting this gorgeous sort of pudding consistency. We're gonna take it 1 step thicker. And this sort of slow cook with the double boiler is what gives you the smoothest results. You're not gonna get any curdling of the eggs. You're actually gonna get there, I think, a little faster than 15 minutes. Might even get there by 12. Make sure you work your way around the edges of the bowl every once in a while so nothing is setting or cooking there. Meanwhile, let's check on our cakes, which have been in about 35 minutes at this point. You can see they're not jiggling at all. And I think they are perfect, actually. I think we caught them just in time. If you have a toothpick, oh yeah. See that tiniest bit of wetness at the bottom? We are talking literally 2 minutes more, and then they are ready to come out. All right, this is really coming up fast. How long has it been? 11:09. What we're looking for is when I dip the back of a spoon into the custard and go like that. See how it doesn't creep in towards each other? That's nappe. That is a good texture, nice and thick. I'm gonna give both of these things 1 more minute and then they are done. You can also actually see how much it changes as it cools. So watch. Let this cool for a second. I promise not to eat it yet. See how thick and sticky it is as it cools? No movement. Nothing dripping off right away. That's how you know it's gonna stay on the cake. Okay, now I'm gonna eat it. Okay, now check this out. This is right at the part where I think we are in good shape. I'm gonna kill the heat. Oh, 1 and 2 gorgeous, beautiful homemade cakes with your secret ingredient in there. Now here's the time where we add the fun stuff. We're gonna add in 8 ounces of chopped pecans, tenderest nut, and 14 ounces of sweetened flaked coconut. Oh yeah, let's mix it up, shall we? Are you catching your mouth from falling open and drooling right now? Just me? Just me, okay. So that's exactly what we want, where it has just a little bit of looseness to it still, because as it cools, remember it sets up even further. We're gonna spread it along the edges of the bowl just to speed up the cooling time. I want it still warm enough that it will spread easily, but it does need to thicken just a touch more. Stir it once or twice from now till then. Don't say I didn't tell you. I let the cakes cool in their pans for about 10 minutes, and I just want to pull them out before they cool too much so that they don't end up sticking more to the sides of the pan. Here's how you're going to do it. A little bit of frosting in the center of your cake plate so that your cake stays where you put it. Flip that bad boy over. Try not to break your nails. Ooh. And then, ha! I never doubted it. This is so gratifying. That's what I'm talking about. Look at how springy it is. Soft, luscious, divine. Now, we really let them cool, like an hour, maybe a little longer, and then we will ice them, and then we will set it aside until it's time to eat some cake. Okay, so the cakes are nice and cool. Our frosting is still gently warm. I stirred it just once or twice as it cooled, and you can see how nice and thick it's become. Just take a nice sized scoop to the center of your cake, and I just smooth it towards the edges. You don't even need to be so precise, because I'll tell you what I like about this cake is I very rarely end up actually frosting the sides. I don't end up doing it on the side because I want to be able to taste the cake. You made this cake from scratch. It is delicious. It's worth experiencing some, you know, where cake is the primary bite as opposed to always just where frosting is the bite. So this is the balance that I like. Laying my cake gently over top, making sure it's nice and centered. You can kind of wiggle it and rotate it if you need to. And just smooth that out to the edges, being gentle because this cake is delicate. And you did a beautiful job making it really a tender homemade chocolate cake. And because we spent our time over that double boiler with the frosting, it is thick and staying in place. It's not running away from us. This is exactly how I make cake for my dad's birthday. This is exactly how I used to make it for John's birthday, until he discovered torta caprese, which you guys have the recipe for from an earlier IGTV, which I do love. But it's undeniable. This is a powerhouse of a birthday cake. And there is your ultra decadent, divinely inspiring, truly delicious, homemade German chocolate cake. Okay, you know what has to happen? Someone's got to try this. I guess it'll have to be me. And this is what you really care about, because when this birthday cake comes out to the table and everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's German chocolate cake. What you really need to be able to do is cut out a gorgeous slice that scoops onto the plate with serious height and juiciness. Oh my gosh. Are we joking here? Wow, wow. I mean, can we talk about this cake first of all? Tender, moist, moist, moist crumb. Remember about that pudding. Remember, toffee frosting with the caramelized pecans and coconut going on in there with the condensed milk. I mean, make sure you get some frosting on your bite and plenty of cake. It is a truly spectacular German chocolate cake. And I feel like it speaks for itself.